Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our UIA 101 webinar. Today's session's been organized for you by the Michigan Manufacturers Association, better known as MMA, and the Association for Human Resource Management, AHRM, working together to bring you this helpful information from the Michigan Unemployment Insurance Agency. As background, since I know we have members from both associations on the webinar today, my name is Kim Bennick, and I'm honored to serve as the president of AHRM this year. AHRM is a local chapter of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and AHRM serves over 200 local members who practice in the human resources field in the Grand Rapids area. Our website is ahrm.net. The Michigan Manufacturers Association, MMA, is the state's leading advocate focused solely on securing a prosperous future for Michigan manufacturers through effective advocacy, meaningful education, and strategic business services. Established in 1902, MMA now represents the interests and needs of nearly 1,700 member companies, ranging from small manufacturers to the world's largest and most well-known corporations. And for more information about MMA, please visit mimfg.org. During today's session, please use the chat feature to pose your questions for our presenters, and we'll answer as many as possible on today's call. We may run over on time as we have a lot to get to, but if you have to hop off, please be assured that today's slides, along with the recorded presentation, will be made available to attendees after today's event. Next, I'd like to introduce today's facilitator. Dave Worthams is the Director of Human Resource Policy for MMA, and I'll turn things over to Dave now to introduce our presenters. Dave?
Thanks, Kim. Appreciate the introduction. And good morning, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Dave Worthams. I am the Director of Human Resource Policy here at the MMA. Very happy to have you here with us. Behind the controls today, I want to give props to my colleagues, Dane Cook and Delaney McKinley, who have helped do a lot of the organization behind the scenes, and really grateful for them to make the technology work for me today. Our main presenter is a great person, great knowledgeable person who I think will answer a lot of your questions and give you a lot of good information about how the Unemployment Insurance Agency works. Carrie Dillon is a UI analyst for the Office of Employer Ombudsman for UIA. She has served the agency for nearly 19 years. Starting out as a claims interviewer in Adrian, Michigan, she moved into the Detroit Remote Initial Claims Center as an examiner, and then became involved with projects involving adjudication, UI extensions, and UI fraud. She has been in her position since 2009. And was part of the tech and modernization area, and was part of a new program of MIDAS for the tax and benefits side of the agency. In 2014, she took a position to work in the Office of Employer Ombudsman, and she assists the manager staff and employers by providing some outreach services to them. A graduate of the Eastern Michigan University and of Spring Arbor University, where she holds a master's degree. Please help me welcome a wonderful woman, Carrie Dillon. Take it away, Carrie.
Thank you kindly, Dave, and thank you all for attending today. I'm hopeful that everyone can hear me well. Dave, give you a signal. Is that all right?
You're good.
All right, thank you kindly. All right, so today I'm going to be happy to present to you information regarding the Michigan Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. Within that agency will lay unemployment insurance, and we will get started. Next screen. There I am, analyst with the Office of Employer Ombudsman. A little bit of my information there, and I believe we will be sharing out this presentation today. Dave, I believe, will be doing that, or Delaney. Next slide. So we kind of built this out with some content. So we're going to talk a little bit about what's unemployment, navigating Michigan's Web Account Manager, also known as MiWAM. Talk a little bit about benefit claims. We'll talk about the employer account. We'll talk about the appeals process, And we'll also give you information regarding additional resources for UI. Next slide. So what is our mission at Unemployment Insurance? You know, unemployment insurance is a benefit that provides temporary income to workers who have lost their job through no fault of their own. The purpose of the agency is to serve as a liaison between unemployment insurance and its employer customers. The goal, as always, is to provide accurate, professional, and timely assistance. With the pandemic, we'll probably have to take a step back with timely, but certainly it is always our goal to be timely as we are monitored pretty closely by the Department of Labor. The goal also is to provide expeditiously addressing concerns. And within UIA, you know, we have collections, benefit, tax, MiWAM support, workshare representatives that are available to assist and answer your questions as an employer. Next slide. So what is unemployment? You know, the Unemployment Insurance Agency, we operate the unemployment insurance program. Like we just said, the program provides temporary income for workers who are unemployed through no fault of their own while they seek reemployment. Again, the program is funded through unemployment taxes paid by the contributing employers, and we'll talk a little bit about the two different employer types that we have. Next slide. So next we're going to talk a little bit about Michigan's navigating our MiWAM account. Next slide. So in order to get to our Michigan Web Account Manager, we're going to want you to go visit the michigan.gov/UIA webpage. You'll scroll down about halfway. We've also broke down our web page into different categories, so it's easier for navigation purposes. But this is what you'll see when you click on the link that says log in to MiWAM for employers. This is our page. You'll notice on our page that we put a little web link or a little message up there that talks about our taxable wage base. Everyone knows that as long as our trust fund remains above 2.5 billion, you know, employers who are contributing would be eligible for $9,000. But because of the pandemic, I think we're right around 500 million. So we're well below that threshold. So for the year of 2021, we're going to be asking the contributors to pay taxes on the first 9,500, but we can talk a little more about that as we go. But this again is the page that you're going to use to log in. You'll have a username and a password and click the sign in. Next page. Benefit claims. We're going to talk more about benefits. Go ahead with our next slide. So as an employer, you're always probably questioning why am I being charged? So a contributor's employer's state unemployment tax rate is going to be based on the history of charges and how you're making payments to the unemployment insurance agency. And the key to controlling your charges is understanding why you're being charged and also knowing how to avoid them if possible. You want to understand how a claimant qualifies monetarily, and you also want to understand how other factors related to the claimant's eligibility and how we want you as the employer to address those with us in a timely manner so we can help prevent any improper payments. Next slide. So in order to understand how a claimant is eligible for a claim, you know, we have what's called a base period. So within a base period, we're going to use the last 4 of the 5 completed quarters. Now you're probably sitting there saying, okay, well, what are you talking about for quarters? And let's be a little more specific on this. When we look at quarter 6 here, as you'll see on the screen, that's going to be considered the quarter that we are in now. So the quarter that we would consider quarter 6 is going to be the first quarter of 2021, which we would not use that quarter because there are no wages reported because the quarter has not ended. When we look at quarter 5, that's called a lag quarter. It's a possibility that we might use that quarter if the claimant doesn't have wages within the other 4 quarters that you see listed here. So quarter 5, in essence, would be considered the 4th quarter of 2020. Quarter 4 would be 3rd quarter 2020. Quarter 3 would be 2nd quarter 2020. Quarter 2 would be 1st quarter 2020. And then quarter 1, we're going all the way back to the 4th quarter of 2019. So as an employer, if someone had quit or they were fired, let's go all the way back to the 4th quarter 19, and you're getting a copy of a monetary determination, and you're thinking, well, why am I still part of this? Well, as you will see laid out here, we're going to go back for sure the last 4 of the 5 completed quarters. Notice the key word being completed quarters. And so if that person may have termed in very early in that base period, that would be a way that you would be considered to be part of the base period. So again, in a base period, we'll go back the last 4 of the 5 completed quarters. In order for a claimant to be eligible for unemployment, they must have had a high quarter above on or about $3,744 or above, and then a total of the 4 quarters, they must have had at least 1.5 times that high quarter gross wage. So as we probably hear in the news today about the minimum wage, you know, how they're trying to increase the minimum wage, just so you know, the $37.44 is solely based on the current minimum wage that we have that's effective by law. And that's how we calculate the minimum eligibility for a claimant to be eligible for unemployment. So we know in the state of Michigan, I think the average weekly wage is probably around $1,100 and some dollars. But again, you know, they have to have wages in at least 4 quarters. Sometimes it can only be 2, but they have to be above $37.44. And if we took that number times 1.5, we're going to get about $5,616. So if you look at this, how we have it, this person may be eligible for a claim because they have quarter 2 at $14,000, but with a combination of the other quarters, you know, they have succeeded the 1.5 times. So this person, you know, would be eligible for $362, which is the cap on unemployment benefits for a week. And that 362 has been sitting at 362 since the April of 2002. So it's been that way for almost 19 years that we've had that weekly benefit amount being at 362. If we can, let's move to the next slide. So again, here is another one that we will show you that the claimant must have sufficient base period wages. Again, the only time we would use the lag quarter is if that 4th quarter 19 didn't have wages, or if it was well below and we just couldn't use it, or if that quarter might have been used on another claim. Then we could use, you know, the quarter 2 through quarter 5, or we would just use the regular base period, quarter 1 through 4. So there are a couple different ways that we could try to see if a claim could be eligible using the base period or the alternate base period. Next slide, please. So in this one, when we talk about the alternate earnings qualifier, we're going to solely be going on having wages in at least 2 calendar quarters, and the total gross base period wages must be 20 times the state average weekly wage, which is, okay, it's almost 1,100. It's $1,083.33, which equates to 20 times that being 21,666.60. So those are the numbers that we're going to use in a couple different events if a person to try to get them to be eligible. So on general eligibility, once a claimant's qualified for a claim based on the base period wages, the agency will then calculate the weekly benefit amount. So we're so thankful that our new system that we have, which is again almost 10 years old already, it does all these nice calculations for us. So what we would do is take the high quarter wage, multiply it by 4.1, If they had dependents up to 5, we could add $6. But again, the maximum cap is $362. So even if they were having the wages pretty high, above $10,000 a quarter, and another quarter above 11,000, you know, we're not going to be able to add if they had 5 dependents and make it $392. So it would just automatically be capped at $362. But again, dependence is one of the important criterion when you do get a monetary determination, because we want to make sure that if they're reporting they had 5 dependents, we certainly want to make sure that they have 5 dependents that they should be claiming. Next slide talks about general eligibility, employer liability. How is an employer's account charged for benefits? And this is a little bit of a confusion sometimes to employers, because sometimes employees who file a claim might have more than one employer. So you say, what is the first 2 weeks? What does it mean to be charged to the separating employer? So if I worked for GM, and I've only ever worked for GM, GM would always be responsible for the first 2 weeks of my claim. And then, of course, for the remaining base period, if they're all I ever worked for, they're going to be responsible pretty much for the whole claim, starting with 3 through 24, 26 now, because now it's up to 26 weeks they can be eligible to collect again. So that's what we talk about. But in order for the separating employer, if they had more than one employer on the claim, even if the separating employer is new, they would have had to at least worked and earned $2,702 with that employer before that employer would be considered chargeable for the very first 2 weeks of the claim. Again, if they only ever had one employer, that employer would be responsible for the whole claim if they're otherwise eligible and don't have any other issues that we need to address to determine ineligibility. So that is what that means to be the separating employer. Next slide. So this is a copy or a screenshot of what it would look like inside the MiWAM account. And again, when you have access to your MiWAM account, we want to make sure that you have master access, because as an employer, we want you to make sure that you maintain that. You don't have your accountant logging in as you. We want you to be responsible for your own account. And this is the place, if you disagreed with somebody filing a claim, we would want you to immediately to log in, click under Action tab, click File Protest. This is a screen where if you had fact finding, if they were quit, got fired, we want you to click the fact finding tab at the top. And also we do keep track now, I believe since 2015, we've been mandated to keep track how well employers are responding to our requests for information. So you may have a question, what does it mean to be non-responsive? It is just that. So if we were sending you a request for information and you're not responding back of information that the agency needs to determine eligibility of a claim to be paid, and we end up having to make a determination based on the available information, then we may hold you accountable for being non-responsive. And depending on how many claims you might have a year, we actually keep track of that. And if it's more than 2%, you know, the next following year, you may not be able to get any credits back if somebody might have been found to be disqualified. So a very important factor. If you get any kind of correspondence from the agency and it has requests for information, please be sure to log in and respond to us, because we don't want you to be held non-responsive. If you have a question, send us a web notice, send an email to miwamsupport@michigan.gov. Whatever you have to do, call us. We're happy to assist you. Next page, please.
Kim, so real quick, before we move on to that next page, we did have a quick question come in about folks who may not have master access to MiWAM to be able to make those responses. What should someone who's working on HR, working in the MiWAM system, what should they do if they don't have master access?
Very good question. If you do not have master access, I would strongly encourage sending me an email to MiWAM support, one word, at michigan.gov. Let us know your relationship to the business and what your request is to the MiWAM account, and we're happy to share the authorization code, but we really need to know your relationship with the business, because sometimes, believe it or not, we get claimants emailing us saying they're the employer, and we really have to vet and make sure that we're getting the proper requests and not sharing improper information to the wrong people. So certainly we've kind of, because normally the authorization codes are mailed when the business is registered and it goes to the physical location. Sometimes employers are busy and they don't get us the updated address. So then the alternate place is to email MiWAM support at michigan.gov, and we're happy to assist you with that request. Good question. So moving on here to our monetary determination. Now this is what our forms are looking like. And you notice on here, it says monetary redetermination and request for information. Most generally, if you see something, it's a redetermination. I encourage employers to review the original one that was sent to see where the change may be. It could be a wage change. It could be a separation update. It could be maybe a backdating because maybe they were eligible to be backdated. It could be the number of weeks. It could be something on there that triggered the agency to have to process a redetermination. And when we say on here request for information, most generally our monetary determinations are about 4 to 6 pages. It just depends on how many employer names that we have listed on here. And, you know, we give you your information, what you need to do to submit a protest. We give you information regarding if you need to give us additional information about wages, if they might have gotten a severance pay or any extra vacation or some type of other remuneration. We want to make sure that every week that is issued out that's payable to claimants is actually proper, because we are audited by not only the state, by the feds, and we have to make sure that every week is paid properly. And then when we fail to pay properly, you know, that's a corrective action for the agency to make sure that we make sure our processes are correct. So, but again, when we look at a monetary determination, you want to make sure that the name, the Social Security number, you want to look at the base period wages, you want to look at the separation reason, and you want to look at the number of dependents, and you want to make sure that those characteristics are correct. If they're correct and it is a true straight layoff, then that request for information wouldn't apply, because there's no other information that I need to give you, because this document is accurate in itself. So I would store it, you know, wherever the claimant's file is, and, you know, I guess wait for the next one, or if an address issue comes up later, then you would certainly protest through the MiWAM account. Next page. So again, this is page 2. Please be sure when you do get your monetary determination that you look at the employer charging messages. A lot of times employers will email and say, I got this, I don't know what it is, can you explain it? Why am I being charged? So then we'll go through it and we'll look at page 2 under employer charging messages. Now, you know, due to the CARES Act last year, many employers, I would probably say probably the majority of employers where people had to file claims, employers were given credits because they had to do a temporary shutdown due to the COVID situation. Now, if you are still being charged, might be a technicality, which again, we would want you to advise, and then we can assist you with that. But most generally, if you had a monetary, and I believe due to the CARES Act still being extended, we're waiting for some updates, and you might be seeing some charges now, which the agency's working on implementing. So we just ask again for some more patience as we work through getting these legislative updates in place in our system. And honestly, they're really testing vigorously and accurately, because if we have a technical hiccup, then that means more than one's going to be affected, and that means just more work for all of us, which in all honesty we don't need. So I guess I could say we're testing for perfection, or at least as close as we can get it. Again, if you disagree with this, or if it's fraud, we definitely want you to log into your MiWAM account. The first question on the protest, is this protest related to ID theft? And you want to say yes, so that way you complete your information, submit your protest, and then we can open up a fraud referral on the other side overnight. So very, very important to submit protest immediately, so we can help stop any improper payments as possible. Next page. Spoke a little bit earlier about other protests. Again, you'll see a name, social security number. This is where if you might have additional, if you're paying out some extra kinds of remuneration, certainly you want to let us know. Also, if the claimant said they were fired, but you know they quit, at the bottom there, it'll have additional information for you to submit. You know, if the separation is other than what the claimant reported. Just remember though, whenever a monetary determination is issued, this is all solely based on what the claimant told us. Now, as far as wages go, that's what we pull from your wage records. And that's something that the claimants cannot modify unless the employer hasn't reported wages. Then we have no other choice but to accept a statement of wages from the claimant. And then normally you're going to get a notice that says we added wages to your quarterly reports. And then at that point, if you disagree or they're incorrect, and then the only option for that is an audit. And when you get a field auditor coming out, I mean, they're just going to do a full-blown audit on all your books, wages. They're just going to do it all. So very important that the wage records submitted quarterly are accurate and timely, and that way we help avoid that extra work for both of us. Next page, please. So when we talk about misconduct, this is the Supreme Court's definition of misconduct, and that's the terminology that we use. So if you have to terminate, discharge, fire, and that person files a claim, and that's what they reported, that they were fired for whatever the circumstance is, the employer has the responsibility, once you get your fact finding, to make sure that you submit the information so the agency can review it. And if it's determined that it was wrongful intent, evil design, you're able to show an intentional and substantial disregard of the employer's best interest, you know, chances are the agency is going to uphold a disqualification. Sometimes you end up having to let folks go because, let's just be real, you know, maybe they're just not a good fit with our organization. So yeah, you had to fire them, but you really didn't have cause to show that there was an intentional disregard of the employer's best interest. So, you know, that's going to fall under at will. And chances are, if they're able to establish a claim, you know, they may be eligible to collect. But if it's under a performance issue, that they have been verbally warned, they have been written up, they have been giving training, they have been mentored, and they still fail to perform, you know, you have an expectation as an employer to, you know, expect a performance that's satisfactory. And you're able to prove that, you know, we've done all these things to assist this person, and they were aware that their performance was in jeopardy, but they continue to do the same thing over and over without hesitation to make it good. You know, we may find them disqualifying, but again, we're going to look to the employer to have that supporting documentation when that claim is filed. Again, when a claim's filed, we have to send out the fact finding based on what the claimant told us. So if it is incorrect, then certainly we want you to get into your MiWAM account and we want you to change that. But that's the definition that we use, and we put the full burden on the employer to make sure you give us that supporting information. So when we get ready to review, we have what we need to uphold a determination. If we don't have it, most generally our claims examiners will reach out if they need additional information. Next page. So a voluntary leavings is different. It's just the opposite. The burden of proof is on the claimant. So if a claimant said that they had to quit and it was involuntary separation, that claimant has to provide medical evidence that continuing work would be injurious to their health or safety, that they unsuccessfully attempted to secure alternate work from you, and they unsuccessfully attempted to secure, leave of absence. So when a claimant files a claim and says they quit and it was involuntary, they have to prove to the agency all three of these bullets before the agency can rule that they're not disqualified for having to involuntarily separate from the employer. If they can't prove all three, then they'll certainly be held disqualifying. And then the other portion is if they voluntarily left, but with good cause attributable to the employer, again, the claimant has to prove that they had good cause to quit. If it's harassment, if it's risk to safety and health, if it's, well, it's hard, it's just, the claimant has to prove to the agency that it had good cause to quit. But before they quit, they must also be able to show that they advise the employer if it's something to risk of safety or health, or if it's harassment or discrimination, that they have brought that to the employer's attention and they have allowed the employer reasonable time to fix or correct or whatever the issue may be. I mean, they can't just, or if it, let's just say your paycheck bounced, their paycheck bounced, and maybe there was a technical error at the bank, and they come in and say, if I don't get my money today, I'm just going to quit. Well, we all know that's just, it's really not good cause. I mean, if they want to quit, well, that's up to them, but things happen. And I can say that happened to us one year, and our HR was immediately on the ball to send out an email and say, hey, we were notified, the bank had a problem and your payments are going to be delayed a couple days. But just know that we're working on it. Okay, well, we appreciate that. So that doesn't give us good cause to quit. It lets us know that there was a problem, it was being taken care of, and we could go on performing like we need to be doing to service the people. But in today's environment, I could probably see claimants trying to do that. But just know that you as an employer have a right. If they bring something to your attention, you have a right to take time to get it fixed or address it or come to a conclusion that, it's resolved. Next page. So when I talk about providing information to the agency, if somebody quit and they give you a resignation letter, that's something that we want to see, because that shows the agency that they quit. They voluntarily initiated the separation. Or if they were fired, and you can give us the copy of the handbook policy, the verbal warnings, the written warnings, the disciplinary actions that taken place. This is where we're going to want you to, come in here and give us this information. You'll also notice under questionnaire. So again, as I was talking earlier, if somebody reported that they were fired, but they quit. So at the top where it says issue detail, that's what the claimant reported. But you as the employer have a right to come in and you can change that. So under questionnaire, you see where it says change issue and it says change fact finding. You would select from the drop down the proper reason for separation, and then you can answer the questions and upload your information. If you utilize it in the way that we have hoped to design it, it would really be super successful. But sometimes, there are barriers, and, we understand that, but just know that those options are there. And this is what we would really prefer to have for it to be successful. But of course, we still have the mail, which we're up to date. I think we're about on a 2-day delay, which is very normal for us. So today being Friday, I think we would be working on Wednesday's mail coming in. So that's very, very current. Our fax, it does work. So, and then our MiWAM information to get this to us. Next page. So around 4th of July, Christmas, Thanksgiving, under the Benefit Services tab, we have a way for you to report this vacation holiday bonus information to us. And we want you to utilize that ahead of time if you can, only because when the claimants get ready to call in, they're going to give us their portion of information. And while we'll have your information, it'll automatically be programmed in once they respond to the agency with that info. And then we can timely get a decision out and pay them timely. Same thing with determination and decisions. If there's a protest out there and both parties could respond timely to that, then we can get a decision out. If you're a school out there and you want to have a school denial periods in place, you certainly, I think coming up in March will be the time that we'll start to send those forms out to have schools, colleges, get that information into us for this year and next year. So that way, if someone were to file a claim, your account would not be chargeable based on that particular seasonal denial period. Seeking work waivers are going to be starting to come into effect again. Right now, they were on hold, if I can say, because of the pandemic. But some of the requirements with these extensions that are going on right now are requiring registrations for work and stuff. So, but this seeking work waiver is where the employer would write in, and if they're going to be down because of a tooling change or because of some kind of upgrading needing to take place within the work environment, whether it's the, probably employers are having to work on their HVAC systems, and you're going to be down for less than 45 days, and we would want you to submit the work waiver. But right now, to the best of my knowledge, that is still indefinite. It should say 3/15 of 2020 and have an indefinite ineligibility out there if somebody were to file, because we still have those in place. And then the last thing under benefit services is the view benefit charge and credits. So every week, Tuesday specifically, if you were to log into your MiWAM, you would see the UIA 1136, or if you get one bi-weekly, you'll see it in there every other week. But you certainly can log in. You will be able to submit a protest if you disagree with somebody collecting unemployment. Can we go to the next page? So this page talks about our 1136 statement, very, very important statement. You want to make sure the name, the social security number, the certification week ending date. Just know that for unemployment purposes, it's a Saturday. So like for the month of February, that could have read 2/6, 2/13, 2/20. And if you see underneath claimant reported earnings, it's 0. If they were working for you, you would always want to make sure that they reported the gross amount, never the net. And then you're going to see the offset, the charge and credits. If you don't see a negative, that means it's a charge. And again, as a contributing employer, you pay the quarterly contributions into the trust fund for claimants to be paid based on their eligibility. Next page. Now this section 20F is for all employers that want to let us know if they have people that are working part-time, or even if they're full-time, but maybe they're still underemployed with you right now, maybe due to the pandemic. And well, I shouldn't even say pandemic. Let's just say everything is good right now and we're back to normal. But Section 20F pretty much states that if you have a claimant that's earning more than what your chargeability is per week, so if your chargeability was $100 and they're making $150 a week, then you're going to want to protest on this statement and advise the agency with a payroll sheet to show that they would have worked and earned more than what your chargeability is. So that way we can give you credits called earnings in excess credits to your account. So that way you're not charged as long as you keep them above that chargeability. And as long as they maintain above that, they could still collect unemployment. We would still want to make sure that they are reporting their gross amount of earnings. But if the gross amount of earnings is more than what you would normally be charged on that claim, then you would want to protest. Again, this is only if they are underemployed or even if they're working part-time. Of course, if they're full-time, we know they should not be collecting unemployment. Next page, please. So in the MiWAM account, you will have a section called Quarterly Benefit Charging Credits. You would be able to click on the quarter as you see, and within that quarter, if we go to the next page, you'll be able to see the breakdown. Can we go to the next page? If you see here, if you clicked on the quarter, this is what it will look like. We'll break it down with the people that might have collected. And then if you see a negative, that means that we would have credited back those 4 weeks. If you see a positive like the 60/40, then you would want to really drill down for this person. And if you looked at the weeks, then you would want to make sure that they reported accurately, or if they truly are on a layoff, then you know that your total chargeability for that quarter. So some of you might be out there sitting, well, what is she talking about chargeability? What does she mean when we're going to be charged? Do we pay that dollar amount? Do we get those credits back? And the answer to that is no, you don't get credits back when you see that. But what happens is originally this employer was charged $1,204. Through some kind of determination or reversal, we credited that account back the original $1,204. Same thing here with the $1,806. So what it does is a wash. Charged originally, now we credited, so now you're back to zero. Now the one here that you see the number of items 11 for 60/40, if I were an employer, I would want to click on that and I wanted to make sure that that person was one, truly laid off, didn't have any earnings, then I could accept those charges as they're going to be charged against my account. I don't pay $60.40, but if you're familiar with the tax rate, you'll know that we go back 4 quarters, and that'll be part of the 2022 tax rate when we get ready to process those out. So that's truly how we keep track of the charge and benefits. And as an employer, that's one of the ways that we keep track if your rate is up or if it goes down, which there are other factors, but this certainly is a very large one. Next slide, please. So in looking at that and that 60/40 with those 11 items, and if I'm like, okay, well, this person limited their availability to come to work during those 11 items. So I'm going to submit a protest because I had full-time work available, or if they got hurt and they didn't tell us, but you know they're not able to work, or if they had more income, or if you wanted to protest the earnings in excess, you could do it here. Or if you know that they refused suitable work, or if you know they're not seeking work with you, then you know these are the 5 items that you could address with the agency, so then we can open an issue and start investigating immediately on those weeks that you're advising us. And it's kind of neat because, you know, you submit your protest, we open an issue, we send out the fact finding, and then we make a determination on those weeks. But this is how the employer can also help the agency make sure that we're paying claimants properly as well. Next page, please. So we're back here again to the benefit charges. How do you protest? Most generally, when you address something with us, you'll click on this fact-finding tab here. And that fact-finding tab would allow you, if we could go to the next page, it'll allow you to submit a protest to us. Or if you were to, on the previous page under action, click file a protest to the monetary determination. I think I spoke earlier about whenever I said if it was something to do with fraud, the first question here is this protest related to ID theft? If I said yes, then I would have a couple other things to answer, and then I would submit that. So we can immediately get a fraud referral. But in this case, if it's not related to ID theft, you would say no, and then you would protest the monetary determination with some other information so we can get an issue opened up and start the investigation. Next page. So now we're going to move a little bit, well, I guess, Dave, is there any questions?
We do have a couple. Going back to when a person makes a claim, if an employer agrees with the information that is submitted, is there a need for that employer to still respond? This particular employer does not want to be considered non-responsive or have that on the paperwork.
Very good question. Thank you, Dave. So the question being, if everything is accurate on the monetary determination, do I as an employer still need to submit anything regarding a request for information? And again, that answer is going to be no, because on a monetary determination, again, you want to make sure that the social security number, the name, the base period wages, the reason for separation, and the number of dependents is accurate. If you're not issuing out any extra remuneration after their last weekly pay, then there is no other information the agency would need from you, and the agency would consider that claim to be valid and accurate and okay to be paid as long as the claimant is eligible. So that's a very good question, but we do put that request for information on those forms in case the employer does have something that they need to advise us on that we should investigate. Because again, it is the agency's responsibility to make sure that we are paying all claims weekly properly. Good question. Dave, the next one?
Yeah, we got a couple other questions.
Good.
So go back to slide 31, Dan. There we go. In a case of an employee who separates, but there's a separation agreement, how does the separation agreement impact the completed quarters in determining eligibility, level of benefits? Is there any impact on that part of the decision-making process at all?
So sometimes there has to be a separating agreement because maybe a job elimination or maybe whatever the reason might be, to be quite honest with you. But if during that separation agreement that you end up having to pay out some severance or whatever you might owe them, we're going to want to have that information. And I know sometimes employers are kind of hesitant to give the agency that information, but I can assure you that whatever you send us is confidential. We don't put it in a determination that's blasted out to everybody. But the agency would need that information because, again, if that separation agreement is something, well, let's just say it's egregious, or it just has to be, because we have to terminate our relationship. The agency needs that information to determine should that person be paid unemployment. So if the separation agreement is pretty much going to be like an at-will situation, then chances are they may collect unemployment. So that's why I say within that separation agreement, if it's something egregious and we had to create this agreement because whatever legalities might be, if you're still unwilling or unable to talk about it, then chances are they may be eligible to collect. But again, I tell employers, regardless of what your information says, unless you want to be charged for that claim, you're going to need to tell the agency, this is our separation agreement, this is why we did it, and we are going to protest against the collection of unemployment. Then we need to have that underlying information. Like I said, sometimes those can be pretty serious, but if you're not willing to give the information or you don't want to cause anything, I'm just saying, just because there's a separation agreement does not negate them from being able to collect unemployment. That employer would need to have to divulge that information if they don't want to be charged.
Okay. And then one last question for this section. There is a company that is going to have a layoff beginning on Monday, March the 1st. Can the employer report online to UIA a list of employees who will be filing for unemployment benefits?
Yeah, most generally we would want that information to come in if it's 100 people or more, because that way then that would mean that the agency would want to send somebody out to help those folks, because it's a large number and we want to make sure that they're all successful. But if it's 25, 30, I don't think the agency really would have a limit, but I do know if it's more than 100, we would like to come out to talk, doing a rapid response, because we want to make sure that the claimants know the avenue to file a claim, where to go, what to expect, because now everybody has to create a MyLogin, which is the entryway portal into do business with the state of Michigan. And the Unemployment Insurance Agency is one of those agencies that will be part of the MyLogin. So even though I don't have access to assist with the MyLogin, I would only have information to help out where they need to go. But if it's a small number, then we can certainly, you can email us. Again, you can use the MiWAM support at michigan.gov today. And if I need to get that over to someone depending on where you're at in the state, certainly we can put somebody in contact with you to get some resources pretty quickly to help you out.
Okay, so again, if you've got a layoff coming, provide that information to the MiWAM support email address.
Yeah, they can email that, and I'm happy to get it over to whomever I need to get them helped out so they can help their folks file claims quicker. Yep.
Fantastic. Well, that's the questions we have for this part. So on to appeals.
Oh, great. So now we're going to talk about, as an employer, are you liable for unemployment insurance? So the majority of people that usually register for a business, it is going to be under Section 41(1) of the MES Act. And what that says is that I'm an employer, I'm going to hire somebody, and I'm going to pay them $1,000 in wages for covered employment in a calendar year, or I'm an employer, I'm going to hire some people, but it might take me about 20 different weeks to before I become established, or I'm just going to, hire someone for, 20 different calendar weeks, and then I could register a business. So either I'm going to achieve my $1,000 first, or I'm going to hire an employee and it might take me 20 weeks before, I might be considered liable. So that's going to be under Section 41(1) as to why you would register a business. Section 41(2) talks about, I'm already established as an employer, but I'm going to acquire an existing business that was already determined to be liable by the agency. Next slide. Section 41(5) is strictly for agricultural. Now within agricultural, you have to have hired 10 people and they could have performed service for you for at least 20 different calendar weeks. But it doesn't have to be with the same employee. You just would have had to hire at least 10 people, work for 20 weeks. Or you could have paid $20,000, in cash to these folks that were performing an agricultural service. So it could be one or the other, but in order to be considered agricultural, you would have had to do one of the two. And then the last reason why we would register a business would be that you're an employee unit and you are a domestic employer, which means if I hired a nanny, if I hired a cook, if I hired a landscaper, but somebody to do that works for me personally, then I become a domesticated employer, and I would need to register because I would have paid that employee more than $1,000. So each of our sections of the Act are pretty specific about what type of unit that you are that you would need to register. Next page. So earlier I talked a little bit about contributing employers. So our contributing employers are our for-profit, or they can be our nonprofit employer that has not elected to be a reimbursing employer. So what is a reimbursing employer? Most generally, these folks are nonprofit employers that are designated as a 501c3 from the IRS. They're usually governmental entities, or they're Indian tribes and tribal units. So remember, if you're a reimbursing employer, you do not pay taxes into the trust fund, but what you do is you pay the dollar for dollar should somebody become unemployed or should someone be considered eligible to collect unemployment. So for our reimbursing communities, you end up having to get a surety bond to make sure that if something happens that you're covered to be able to pay for those charges that you would be assessed. For our contributing employers, you pay a quarterly contribution based on your taxes into the trust fund. The next slide. So when we talk about a tax rate or an experience rated, we have an experience rated tax system that our employers will use, and it's based upon past unemployment benefit claims, your payroll size, and your years of experience. So if you're an employer with more occurrences of unemployment in your workforce, most generally you may pay a higher tax rate. Next slide. Why would it increase? So again, benefit charges, if you've unpaid or underpaid taxes, or if you have an increasing payroll. Next slide. Employer tax rates are calculated by using the following. So if we mail out our tax rates on 12/30, whatever the year it is, but it's always the last day before the New Year's Eve. And those letters may take up a week to get to you, but usually by the first week in January, all those letters are within the MiWAM account. And if you ever open up your tax rate, you'll see three pieces that determine your tax rate. We talk about the chargeable benefit component, we talk about the account building component, and we talk about the non-chargeable benefit component. And all three of those components will equal a total tax rate. Next page. So the chargeable benefit component and the account billing are affected by the employer's payroll, the number of benefit charges to your account, and the number of tax payments received. So these components reflect the company's own experience, and they're also known as the experience components. The next page. So we'll break it down a little bit. On the next page, we're going to talk about the chargeable benefit component. Next page, please. Thank you. So this component takes into consideration the amount of unemployment benefits that are charged to an employer's account over a 36-month period, which equates to 3 years. So we're going to take 36 months of benefits paid, 36 months of the taxable payroll. We'll divide that, and we're going to get the chargeable benefit component. And of course, we have to round to the next higher 1/10%. Next page. The components used to calculate an optimal balance for each one. So we're going to take all the monies that you paid into taxes since the business began. We're going to subtract that from the benefit charges assigned to the business since it began, and that even includes if you bought somebody. So that's the predecessor reserve, and that'll give us our actual reserve. And then when we talk about the required reserve, we like the employer's total gross payroll for the 12 months ending the 30th of June times our cross criterion, which gives us required reserve. So this really is the calculation that we will use to determine the account building component. If you ever look on your tax rate, you'll have real numbers in there. Of course, I don't, but this is the formula that we use. Next page. So when we talk about the non-chargeable benefit component, you know, with the CARES Act, all the charges that took place from 3/15 and continuing, if it's related to COVID, you know, those are all going to the non-chargeable benefit component, which the feds have funded, you know, to cover that, but you'll notice that you won't get a chargeable statement for those. So, but that's pandemic portion that we're talking. But since January of 13, new employers will have a 1% non-chargeable benefit component in the third year when they become fully experienced. So even though you might not ever have benefit charges, it's a possibility that you would end up having to even pay 1% into the NBC. So even though, and I know this sounds confusing because I even get confused with it. It just doesn't make sense, but I don't make the rules. The majority of our employers eventually will pay into the NBC. So if somebody was disqualified and that person was able to collect unemployment because they went out to find another job with a liable employer and they satisfied their rework, which is a penalty for quitting or getting fired, and then they collect, your account, whatever that chargeability was, is going to come out of the NBC account. So you are not chargeable for it, but then you end up paying up to 1% into that fund anyway. So for employers with no or very few benefits, the NBC can be as low as, you know, 0.5% or 0.06%. So it's a possibility, you know, that would be the lowest that you're contributing every quarter into that NBC fund. Next page. So when we talk about 36 months of charges to the account, or 12 months, let me correct myself there, 12 months. For 2021, our tax calculation that we use to configure benefit charges, taxable payroll, total payroll, that's the time frame that we use when we talk about 36 months. So we're going back to 7/1/17 to 6/30. In 2020, we went back 7/1/16 to 6/30 of 19. So those are our quarters that we use to determine those tax rate calculations. And again, I didn't have a prerequisite for you to have your tax rate calculation in front of you, but hopefully this presentation will help you understand how the tax rates are calculated. And actually this year I got the opportunity to help test tax rates, and it was kind of intricate, to be honest with you, and we have to make sure that those are done correctly for sure. We'll go to the next slide, please. The tax rate, the effects of a missing tax report. So if any of your tax reports needed for the computation period are missing when we get ready to issue out tax rates, it is a high possibility you're going to get assessed with a 3.0 non-reporting penalty. If none of them reports are filed, the rate will be set at the highest, which is 10.3. And if we add the 3%, I mean, no employer in today's world wants to pay 13.3%. We don't have an obligation assessment right now. But if your reports, once your tax rate goes out, get submitted, you know, we might be able to drop it down 1 point. So then you'll still be assessed that 2%, you know, all for 2021. But certainly once you get that tax rate, you have 30 days to try to get your account cleaned up so we can maybe possibly do a tax rate calculation. Again, the agency's goal is not to ever charge employers above, you know, what our process is, but sometimes it does happen, you know, and all we can say is if you have a question on it, please do the best you can to get with us so we can help you out and get you on the right page. Next page, please. So when we talk about a tax rate, again, we're looking at estimated and zero wages. So estimated wage, if an employer does not submit a tax report, the agency goes ahead and posts an estimated tax report for that employer. And what we do, we base it on the previous quarter. The zero wage tax report, if an active employer doesn't have employees, if you register a business and your first quarter to submit was fourth quarter 2020 and you submit a zero, the agency is going to go back and make your account non-liable. Of course, we'll clean up the penalty and interest, and then you'll have to submit a standalone Schedule away when you truly do hire and pay out the $1,000. So I know a lot of employers like to hurry up and rush in, get it registered, and then they get a payroll association that says, hey, we need your employer account right now. We can't process your payroll until we get it. So then I'll go out and look at the date that the employer says that they're going to achieve the $1,000 payroll, and it might be March 13th. So I'll email them back and say, well, we can't process your application until March 13th. And then the email comes back and they say, well, my payroll says if I don't do this, this is going to happen. And I say, we're not going to process your application until you actually hit the $1,000 payroll. And this is one of the reasons why, because you must make sure when you get ready to submit your quarterly tax that you actually had payroll. Because if you didn't, then the registration becomes non-existent, because then we have to go back and make it inactivated because really you registered under a false requirement. And so we just really try to make sure that our employers understand if you're going to register a business, please understand that based on the date that you give us, whether you're agriculture, whether you're domesticated, whether you're a regular contributor or a reimburser, you have to have met that requirement in order for us to give you the true liability. And when the quarterly reports become due, we don't want to have to go back through and inactivate and tell you what you need to do, because then, of course, it just creates more work for all of us. And we know in the world that we live in, we don't want that. But I think in this case, we can just say it's probably just a misunderstanding. So again, if you ever have questions, feel free to email. We'll have that on our resources page. Next page. So our next page is going to talk a little bit about construction. The construction rate for 2021 is 6.0%. But we're going to have this calculation on the back of the chargeable, or on the back of the tax rate page. It's how we calculate that information. So with the construction folks out there, you know, we have to take all construction and we configure all the numbers and we average it out. And for this year, it's 6.0%. Next page. So using the MiWAM account again, when you log in, this is an example of an employer that may have master access. You might be asking, well, why are there two UI tax links? Sometimes an employer inactivates for a certain period of time because maybe they just, you know, they decide, well, we're done with work. We're just going to inactivate the account. And then all of a sudden something great comes along and they need to be reactivated. So if that ever happens to you, as long as you're using the same federal ID number, we're not going to remove your old account. It'll still be sitting there, but it'll be grayed out. So the only account that we're concerned with is going to be the link that is in blue. And we just want you to just, you know, look at that account and take care of it. But again, earlier I spoke with you about getting in contact with us under I want to on that right-hand side. You see chat with an agent. We have agents from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day that are on with the chat. We also have the send unemployment a message, which is where you can, just like you send us we call it a web notice, more or less pretty much an email internally. You can send secure information through that because this is a secured portal. If you want to view our employer handbook, if you want to set up email reminders, sometimes just know if you do decide to set up an email reminder, what that is that 25 days before the quarterly report is due. So like on 4/1, we'll start sending out email reminders saying, hey, the first quarter 2021 is due by 4/25. And then 10 days before the report is due, we're going to send out another one. So if you decide to set up email reminders, just be aware that those are automated. So if you sign up, you're going to get them. If you have a power of attorney on record that might be a little difficult, that you decide that you no longer want to have a relationship with, then you can click on add or update power of attorney. Or if you need to add somebody, you want to cease the old one first, wait through overnight batch, and then the next day you may go in, click add or update power of attorney and add a new one. If you're a business that has you need a specific payment plan quote, you can click that. You will get like an automatic breakdown of what the agency can do to help you. But if that isn't good enough or not able to reach those needs for you, you certainly are going to want to send an email or get on our phone system and get through to tax collections so they can set up a specific payment plan for you, and they will do that. So if you try the payment plan quote and you think it's too much and you really need it to be a little lower, just make sure you get back with us so we can help you out. If you're an employer that wants to apply for the Work Opportunity Tax Credit, that's what WOTC means. Again, Work Opportunity Tax Credit is where you're an employer that you're going to hire different specific people from work groups, whether it's veterans, whether it's people on assistance, whether it's, I think felons might be one of them, or people coming out of rehab or something, and you want to get a tax credit that way, then certainly you want to apply for that. And then if you decide you want to request a benefit charge file, you'll complete your information and then certainly we will send it to you. Again, when you click on accounts, UI tax link, we'll probably go into that in the next page. Recent items, any type of activity that you have completed in your MiWAM account will be able to be seen. Multi-account services, but we're ready to go to the next page. So under next page, we have the multi-account services. Here is where this might be more beneficial for your power of attorneys that are having access properly to your MiWAM account. They would not be logging in as you, but they would have access under their MiWAM account, which we strongly encourage. We do not encourage employers sharing your information with your accountants or your CPAs, TPAs, because this account is strongly and only for the employer. Now, if you have a power of attorney and they've completed you as a client to upload you into their account, then they have those authorizations and you would be notified by mail. But when we talk about bulk payment filing, bulk report filing, most generally this is going to be for those type of folks that they're going to be submitting, large files to take care of these, depending on who their clients are. Name and addresses, you now have the ability to take care of names and address. Well, they really should probably remove names because we still need to have the articles of incorporation and the SS4 from the IRS should you incur a new name change. We would like to get those so we can properly get you updated. But you can update your addresses out here by clicking the name and address link. Next page. Viewing recent periods. We do that by clicking the UI text link from the previous 2 pages, and then the periods page here is what we like to call this, and you can see the quarters. And if you have a balance due or if you had a credit, you certainly could click on the blue hyperlink, whether it's first quarter or third quarter, if you needed to make a payment. You will also notice under I want to how these different tabs have changed. So under I want to, if you wanted to view your account, if you wanted to manage report and payments, a lot of employers are deciding to go green because the mail is a little slow right now due to the pandemic. If you decide to go green, we welcome that, but also know that we will send an email to let you know that you have correspondence. And then at that point, it would be up to you to log into MiWAM account, take a look at those correspondence. If they require requests for information, please get the agency that information. If you needed to register a new location, use a voluntary payment worksheet. Most generally that is used because you want to give the agency a voluntary payment to help reduce maybe your tax rate because you're putting a little more money into your required reserve to help offset any maybe chargeable benefits to the account. If you want to mail in a payment to the agency, we do have a copy of the payment voucher, and we're going to talk a little bit more about register for workshare as we go. But I think that if you ever had account alerts, we'll have alerts under here like this one says, hey, you owe this money. So if you ever were to click that, the check is going to pop up and it's going to allow you to make a payment. But I would strongly encourage, if you do owe the agency, that you click on the specific quarter that you owe and you make a payment there, because that way we can apply the monies properly. If you were to click at the top and you really just meant to pay the first quarter 2020 here, as you see, we're going to apply that money to the oldest debt first and then go up the ladder. So if that's all you owed was first quarter, I'd say go ahead and pay it under account alerts, because that's the only place that the account's going to see that monies are owed. Next page, please. So viewing recent items, again, this system is infinite. We do not delete, we do not purge, it is there. So if I had submitted a report or I submitted some information for fact finding, it would always be located under requests waiting to be processed by me clicking more. I would see my activities on the next page. If I needed to filter something, I could put in my confirmation number or the date I did it, and I can specifically see what I did. Under all letters, if you are designated to get your own letters and you don't have a power of attorney that's getting these, then you will see your letters listed. If you needed to go look for a specific letter, you could click more and filter based on the UIA number. And then under unread notices, this is where if you were to send us a web notice and we responded back, this is where you're going to find the unread notices, and you could always click the little more tab to see more information. Next page, please. So when we're using MiWAM and you're a master of the account, this is what your account, when you click on account services, is going to look like. Manage report and payments. Yearly wage evaluation. This is a very nice tool, and in all honesty, I really wished we had it on our side, but we don't. When we talk about yearly wage evaluation, you know, we just got the fourth quarter submitted, and some employers would write into us and they would have questions and say, well, I don't understand why I owe you this money, saying because I submitted everything properly, the tax rate didn't change. So I would encourage them, go with them actually, and click on that link. And what that does is it breaks down all your quarters that you submitted for that year. And you can see almost immediately where the error might be, because most generally it's a Social Security number. And that will be where the offset will be. And then you just go back and amend your quarter, and then everybody's happy because things got fixed. Underneath account maintenance, you see several items listed here to determination of employer status, seasonal employer. Again, if you're a seasonal employer, if I'm talking to any of you folks, you're going to want to get that information in as soon as possible because we're almost approaching March. Most generally, they take place from like April to September. So you really are going to want to have your business, even though you say you're seasonal because you might do landscape or snow removal. If you're not listed as a seasonal employer with the agency and somebody files a claim and it's due to a true layoff, then your account will be chargeable. So please take a look at that application for seasonal designation. If your account has credits on it, we normally will mail them out. We'll mail you out a letter the 25th. Like right now, the credits should be going out the 25th before the 25th day before the quarter ends. So right about now, we should be mailing out letters to employers to let you know if you have credits on your account. You could log back in if you decide you want to request it, or you could email tax support and ask them to move your credits up to the next quarter to help do an offset. I encourage employers to do that sometimes if it's, you know, a small amount, but sometimes if it's a very large one, it does have to go through its clearance before the agency will be able to send out that check. Disclosure of account, discontinuance of business. Sometimes the IRS is contacting you and saying, hey, we don't have receipt that you were a business that paid taxes to the state of Michigan in 2018. I think that's what they're up to now. So you could actually do your own IRS, just put in the year or the next business day, you could go in and print the letter. The Michigan tax credit, your tax rate history, transfer of business. Let's see, tax issue and assessments if you need a clearance of account. If you're requesting a waiver, again, you disagree that we charged you some penalty and interest. I'm going to tell you, if you have that on your account, you're going to want to make sure that your reports are submitted, they're accurate. You've paid the total tax due along with the interest. And once those payments post and reports are submitted, then you could request a waiver. That is the exact process. The tax rate protest, that time has ended because that would have been up to January 31st. I shouldn't say it ended, but I'm saying in order to be a timely for a tax protest, you had up until January 31st of 2021 to protest the 2021 rate. So that's how that would go. And then we talked about the benefit services piece. Dave, do we have any questions up till now?
We do. We do.
Oh, good.
Let's see, going through some of these. We have, if an employee's last day of severance is Tuesday, March 9th, can that employee apply for benefits now? Can they apply for a future start date, or do they need to wait until the severance is completed?
You know, that is a very good question. So the question is, a person's getting severance, and can they apply now, or do they wait till the severance is done? To be quite honest with you, they're welcome to apply as soon as their last day of work took place. I mean, that beginning of that next week, they can file their claim. They would need to advise the agency that they are getting a severance payment. And again, the employer can do the same thing on the monetary determination. Or if the claimant doesn't want to go through all of that adjudication process, they are welcome to wait until they've received all their severance pay. And then that next week, like if the severance is taking them through March 9th, you know, they could probably file their claim the week of the 14th. Good question.
Yeah. Next question that we have is, it seems as if protests are taking longer than usual to respond to people these days. And there are some folks saying that most claims are being approved regardless if there's been a protest. Any comment to that?
So when a claim is filed, there is an automatic 10-day hold on a claim. when the pandemic hit, you know, I can just be honest with you, the goal was to answer the phones, get the claims filed, and if we can pay them, if they're eligible, pay them. So now, since we're a little, you know, within the pandemic, but we're coming out of it, the goal is once the claim is filed, that mail date that you see on the upper right-hand side, you have to count 10 business days from that date before that claim becomes payable. If the agency does not get a protest from the employer within those 10 business days, that claim becomes payable. And most generally, we may see a delay with that if it is by mail or fax, because that requires a manual review of documents and to open up the issue, which may cause the claimant to be paid. Now, I encourage employers, and if you've done this through the MiWAM account, protested under Benefit Services, click Determination Decisions, under the Action tab, click File Protest, then we're going to want to see that, because if that's a technical issue, certainly we need to get that worked on, because we don't want any improper payments to be issued, especially if there's a legitimate protest coming through. I mean, that's the whole goal of protesting early, so we allow that employer time to get us that information so we can open an issue and address the separation.
Okay. Next question we have deals with fraud. In a recent legal seminar, it was suggested that individual employees create their MI login even if they're not unemployed, in order to help lock their account and to help prevent ID theft in their name with their social security number. Is this the case? Does this actually help? Or is there anything else on what individual employees can do to help prevent fraud in their name, even if they're not planning to collect UI benefits?
You know, I wasn't part of that legal seminar, so I honestly cannot quote or comment on that, but I can tell you that the employer is always the first one to get a copy of that monetary determination. And if it is fraud, you have to log into MiWAM account immediately and submit a protest online, because one of the first questions is this related to fraud, or is this protest ID theft? Or, you know, you want to say yes and complete that. What that does is completes a fraud referral overnight on our side, and we get started to add that to the fraud listing. And it does put an indicator on the claim to help prevent fraudulent activity. Now, if you're mailing or faxing, again, that's going to take more time, because they have to be, you know, assigned to staff to look at. But most generally, if a victim is, you know, subject to fraud, we're going to look to the employer to hurry up and let us know so we can get started. And again, if you want to send us a web notice, email, you know, I don't ever turn employers away when they're talking about fraud, because it's just more work for everybody. And even though it is going to be listed as fraud, once you let us know, we're going to let the process take its place, which means our regulation agents are going to vet it and do what they need to do. And then once they get it resolved, then everybody gets a letter letting you know that, you know, it's been taken care of. But that is going to be our process. You immediately let us know via web notice, phone call, chat, but you also want to send a protest in immediately so we can address it.
Great. Then a couple more questions before we move on. There's a question about, everybody seems to be working remotely. Things are not quite the norm in how we do things. Is there any way that an employer can get a reprieve or some extra time to work on fact-finding questions before they get listed as non-responsive?
Yeah, the only thing I could suggest to that is if you decide to go green. That's just a logging into the MiWAM account. You will get an email notification. So whoever's email is on that MiWAM account, they're going to need to be paying particular attention. So that way it gives you the time you need to respond timely and adequately. So we do not consider you non-responsive. Other than that, the claim becomes payable, and then, you know, that's just more administrative work for everybody to do.
Okay.
I have had employers actually email me, hey, Carrie, I'm sorry this is late. All I can do is take the information, attach it to the account, and then it'll be up to the claims examiner from that point on. Because I don't write decisions, but I certainly can help get the information where it needs to go.
Okay. And then the last question we have before we move on actually deals with this slide here in slide 50. There's a link there for a waiver of penalty and interest. Do people have an increased ability to receive that waiver of penalty or that waiver of interest now that we're still in the pandemic?
Yeah, I will tell you that is a very good question regarding requests for waiver. So as I spoke just a little bit ago, if you are an employer experiencing, you know, a question on why am I, or I need to request a waiver, again, you want to make sure that your reports are submitted, you've paid the total tax due along with the interest, and notice I didn't say penalty, and make sure that those all get posted. Then the next business day, please log back in and make sure you do the request for waiver. And within that box that you're writing your specific reason why you're requesting a one-time waiver, whatever it is, let the agency know, because chances are the agency will give a one-time waiver. If it's more than one time that you're requesting, chances are they probably are not going to approve it. And maybe you have to go above and actually speak to the manager to make your case again if that is needed. But I do know and can say with accuracy that as long as we get a written statement, you know, that I'm requesting a one-time waiver, it most generally will be approved. But anything more than that, probably don't count on it unless you have something extraordinary that is not common that we can help you with.
Okay, cool. Onward to the rest of the presentation.
Oh, okay, great. Good questions. Thank you, Group. All right, next slide. So using MiWAM, adding payment profiles. So service providers can add additional payment profiles that are exclusive to their clients' accounts, and this will allow payment to be made from the client's bank account and not the service provider's account. You know, we did this probably about 4 years ago where we allowed the additional setup for service providers to add the employer's banking information out there. The only thing that we ask the service providers is to be very careful when you are making those payments, because we have seen cases where they have paid from the wrong pay accounts and it's kind of created little problems. So we just ask that you know, careful review is done before it's submitted. But this is a nice feature, though, that helps out service providers so they're not being responsible for the employer's payments. Next page goes a little bit deeper, shows you on the next page where you have to click the payment sources tab, and then we have the links where you'll click set new payment source. So very nice. Helps you out. I'm hopeful if we have some power of attorneys on or CPAs to help you guys out. So just be real accurate when you're making those payments, though, because we don't want them to come out of the wrong accounts. Next page, please. So our next section is going to talk about the appeals process and information. So under appeals, an employer or a claimant, you get a determination and maybe you disagree with it, or you truly have a high probability of disagreeing. So you have a 30-day window from the mail date to submit a protest. And when you submit a protest to the agency, you're going to give us some new or additional information that maybe wasn't given the first time around. And this might go back to sometimes like these separation agreements. So again, we actually would need that information for us to make a decision that might possibly be reversed. So again, the 30 days starts to run after the date of the mailing. Every day counts, including weekends and holidays. But if that 30th day falls on a weekend or holiday, then it's going to go to the next business day. Next page, please. If you decide to request an appeal, remember it's a de novo hearing, so the ALJ will take your testimony. They'll talk about the rules of evidence, just as like if you were in a real court of law. Well, I shouldn't say as if you are, but you will be in a court of law. Each party will be able to give their own testimony. If the appealing party doesn't appear, the ALJ, which is the administrative law judge, will have the right to dismiss due to lack of prosecution. If the party with the burden of proof doesn't appear, then of course, then the other person can make the mea culpa statement, which means whatever I say, the judge has to listen to, and it's a possibility, the judge has to accept that statement because there's nobody else there to offset it or provide anything else. So if the party with the burden of proof makes certain statements to meet the burden, the opposing party wish to be present to respond to the statements can cross-examine. So it's very important whether you're protesting or you're part of the hearing, it's important that you attend it, because if it's going to be a decision that's going to be made about benefits being issued, and if you're a person that just truly disagrees with something, then, and you've given the agency everything, and then, you want the ALJ to hear your statements, then this is the time to make sure, because actually when you're participating in a hearing, even though the agency has made a determination and a redetermination, when you get to the ALJ, it's going to be like starting all over again, because then they're going to take all the info and they'll issue out a decision. And if you still disagreed with the ALJ, you can go to the Michigan Compensation Appellate Commission. That's the next one. And then after that, it would go to the circuit court. So there's like 5 different levels that you can go to in order to get your decision heard and addressed. Next page, please. So our next page, we're going to talk about our additional resources that we have with UIA. And right now, Michigan is one of the leading states in the nation to be pushing Michigan's WorkShare program. And you're probably sitting there, and maybe you've heard about it, maybe you've attended one of our Q&As, but let's get into Michigan's WorkShare. Let's go to the next slide. So what is WorkShare? It's also called short-term compensation, as the feds call it. Some employer states call it shared work program. We just call it WorkShare. So it's an option for employers to reduce employees' hours instead of cutting the full workforce. You're still able to preserve their job, keep your trained workforce during the economic declines by providing prorated benefits to workers you're having to reduce their hours. So instead of laying everybody off, you can keep your staff. They can work anywhere from a reduction of 10% of their hours up to 60%. Now that's per the CARES Act right now and the state of Michigan. Now, if we were in good times, we're still going to promote the WorkShare program. But if you notice here, I got eligibility requirements, and I have next to it, these are the requirements that were waived due to the pandemic. But in normal circumstances, employers' unemployment taxes had to be current. Their experience account balance must have a positive reserve, and they must have been in business for at least 12 quarters, which is at least 3 years. But right now, those eligibility requirements have been waived. So right now, You could be a brand new business that started in the third quarter 2020 and you want to participate in the WorkShare program, and we're going to let you, because this program right now is federally funded. So you as an employer are not charged for these federal benefits or for these benefits, but you're still able to stay open. You're still able to keep your workforce. The thing that's required is that the claimants still, your employees still need to keep their benefits. So however that works for you, but we want to keep your business opened. We don't want you to go out. I do have a nice little video here, which I'm hopeful that Dane can bring it up for us on the next page. And if we can take a moment to listen to it, and we'll talk a little more.
During this global pandemic, we know that many Michigan businesses are faced with extremely difficult choices to make when it comes to their workforce. You don't want to lay off staff, they're like family, but what else can you do? You don't want to lose your talented workforce to another employer. The answer is the WorkShare program. The WorkShare program saves employers money and skilled workers and employees jobs. Here's how it works. Instead of cutting jobs, you cut hours. Then employees collect partial unemployment benefits for the hours they've lost. Say an employee's hours are cut temporarily by 40%. In addition to a partial paycheck, the worker will get 40% of his or her regular weekly unemployment benefits. In other words, employers save payroll and hang on to their skilled workforce, while employees keep their jobs and collect unemployment for the hours lost. Employers retain talent. Don't think of the WorkShare program as unemployment insurance. Rather, it's employment insurance, a safety net. This is a program that keeps workers employed. This is a program that shows employees that you care. This is a program that allows employers to keep their talent. The WorkShare program protects your business during the lean times. That is, until you're ready to contact Pure Michigan Talent Connect, Michigan's employment services system, to start hiring new workers. How successful has the WorkShare program been? The majority of business owners who have used it would sign up for the program again, and virtually all would recommend it to other employers. Testimonials from Michigan employers include high praise for the WorkShare program. Employers are happy to enroll again if needed. In every business, there are peaks and valleys. When you hit one of those valleys, we'll be here for you. Here's how to reach us when you're ready to get started.
Thank you for that. So if you have WorkShare questions, again, the only new thing that I can tell you, and this was in place, and it was to help with any type of fraud. We had an automation advice come out back in October where we had to validate the Social Security numbers. So if you're a new employer or an employer that wants to sign up with this, I have to tell you that when you get ready to add your staff to the WorkShare plan, you have to make sure that they have been on the fourth quarter 2020 wage record reporting, because that's the only way, one of the only ways that we're going to be able to validate that Social Security number. And again, when the employer submits the WorkShare plan application, the claimants must be able, and employees must be able to establish a regular unemployment claim. So if you consider 40 hours a week as full-time and you're having to cut the workforce back 50%, you would create a WorkShare for 50%. And then when you put those folks on the WorkShare plan, we're going to, the processing of your WorkShare plan, we're going to run those Social Security numbers to make sure that they can establish a claim. And if they can, we're going to mail them a notice of a notice of shared work program letter. It's called a UIA 1054. And that'll give them the amount of partial unemployment that they will get. Now, they still work in 20 hours with you. We're going to pay them a portion based on whatever their weekly benefit amount is times that 50%. So if they're eligible for 362 and they're reduced 50%, we'll take the 362 times 50%, which means they'd be eligible for $181 a week with the WorkShare program. They'll still get paid the 20 hours that they're working for you. They still keep their benefits. And then you as the employer do all the filing for that. The claimants, all they have to do is come to work, whatever the reduction of hours is. And by this time, most generally, since we got about 2.7 million people that have probably created MiWAM accounts, they probably already have a MiWAM account. And the only thing they would need with that MiWAM account is if they wanted to change their payment update. But like I said, since they probably already have it, they probably already have a payment method on record, because our default payment method is going to be the Bank of America debit card. But you can't, if you decided as an employer that business is picking up, we're going to be hiring new people, just remember you can't hire, you can hire, but you couldn't hire the new people and put them on a WorkShare plan, because chances are they have not been submitted on your wage record reporting, which means that they would probably be denied. So, and we can talk more about that if we have some questions. But we want you to give a call to the 844 967-5474. But you know what? I'm going to have to apologize to you right up front here. That number is actually not a working number. You're going to actually call the 855-436. See, 855-484-2636. I'm so sorry. That is our OEO line, and you'll have to listen to the prompts to go to option 7. I am so sorry. Please accept my apologies for that. Sorry about that, guys. That is one error I did see. 855-484-2636, and it's going to be option 7. So sorry. I'll get that corrected. And then they're willing to help you. But again, as we talked about within the MiWAM account, you would click on the register for WorkShare. We did break it down into 3 nice pieces because we want to make sure that employers are submitting their information and can check it, so for accuracy. And we're ready to go to our next page. Yes, I'm sorry, guys out there. Under employers, you'll see our phone number out there. But for WorkShare, it's going to be option 7. I forgot. You know what? Last year we went to two phone lines. One phone line for claimants and one phone line for employers. And the employer line is the 855 number, 484-2636. And the claimants line, you'll see on the left-hand side, is the 866-500-0017. So within each of those lines, they would have to listen to the prompts to get to the right area for the assistance that they need. You'll also notice on the fraud link, we actually got rid of the phone number. They got rid of the email address for the fraud, and they're just directing everybody. If you are on the MiWAM page for employers, you'll see under online services, the fraud links. But if you went to visit our regular UIA web page, you will also notice there is a fraud little section out there that you can click on the links. So if any of your employees are a victim of fraud, they are going to want to complete the information and get it sent back into the agency so it can be attached to that fraud investigation, so they can be cleared that they did not file that improper claim. And if they should need unemployment in the future, then they would have to do one manually with the agent on the phone, because they would not be able to file on their own. And I guess you all probably know, based on the papers, you know, we did have a high volume and we still do. But again, our employer community is our closest partner. to help us combat the fraud. So that means protesting immediately if you come across a claim that you strongly know is truly fraud. And the last page is a thank you for attending. Please accept my apologies for that phone number. I will get that updated.
Not a problem, Carrie. We made sure to put the phone number in the question and answer box.
Okay.
It actually shows that Delaney and I are copying each other, so we'll make sure that information gets out there.
All right. I'm so sorry, guys.
Don't worry about it. Worry about it. We do have one question that's come in about the WorkShare program.
Sure.
Question is, can employees that have been on full-time unemployment be hired back at part-time and changed into the WorkShare program?
Yeah, they can, because as long as they are on your previous wage record reports, like I said, if you're an employer and you're getting ready to submit a WorkShare plan, whoever you have on that plan, you want to make sure that you did submit them on your wage record report for the fourth quarter. If they've always been your employee, then that's not going to be a problem. If they were full-time, we brought them back and now they're part-time, and full or part-time can be part of WorkShare. It's just you as the employer determine, what do I consider full-time? I say 40 hours because that's, I work 40 hours, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you as an employer consider 40 hours full-time. It could be 36, it could be 32. Same thing for part-time. It doesn't have to be 20, it could be 6, it's whatever you decide that it is. We do not dictate to you that 40 hours is full-time, 20 hours is part-time. It's whatever based on your business.
Okay, fantastic.
Good question.
Yeah, an excellent question, and definitely a great program. I know that it saved a lot of funds from being burned in the trust fund, and definitely Michigan, I think, is leading the nation in the amount of people who are participating in the WorkShare program. So thanks for answering those questions and bringing that about. Actually, on this end, I think we are out of questions coming from the audience, so I will leave with one last question for you. And I think I already know the answer to this, but it was a common question that we've been getting in the office here from time to time. If there is a login problem with the MiWAM account, who do we contact for that? Are there multiple places to contact, or is it just sending an email to the support staff?
Correct. It is sending an email to MiWAMsupport@michigan.gov. And to be quite honest with you, that email box is very up to date. So if you send an email, you will get a response within the hour.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Yep.
And again, that is MiWAMsupport@michigan.gov.
That is correct.
Fantastic. Well, Carrie, I really want to thank you so very much for sharing all this information with us today. It was so informative. I think I've taken more notes than I have since I was in college, and it really, I think, is going to be something that a lot of our members and a lot of folks in the business community in general will really appreciate.
Oh, you're very welcome. And if we need to do another one, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to assist. I truly, as an employee of the state, I'm always happy to help our customers, and I want to make sure that they understand as well, because we truly don't want our businesses going. We don't want them leaving. We want them staying, but this is a benefit that they pay for, and we want to make sure they understand what their responsibility is as an employer. So thank you again. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. Please accept my apology for the phone number, and I will get you an updated piece to that to share this out.
Thank you. We'll appreciate that. And just for folks, the attendees to know, we will email a link to the video as well as the updated PowerPoint presentation once we've got that uploaded to YouTube and to our website. and look for that email following the conclusion of today's program. Wanted to plug a couple things that we have coming up here at the MMA. Just a reminder to anyone who's on my healthcare policy committee, we have a meeting next Friday, March the 5th at 10 a.m. Hold on, I need to check that. Yeah, at 10 a.m. So lots of things to discuss, particularly about the bipartisan health care legislation that has been dropped and could have a very big impact on employee benefits. On April 16th, I also have a employment workforce and policy committee meeting that'll be online as well, 10 a.m. on April the 16th. And lastly, want to once again give some very big thank yous to the folks behind the scenes, Dane Cook, Delaney McKinley, who've been working the boards, and of course, another shout out to Kim and the folks at AHRM for co-hosting, co-sponsoring today's event as well. Friends, thanks for joining us. My name is Dave Wortham, and as always, go Blue, go Broncos, and because Carrie's with us, go Eagles.
Oh, thanks. All right, take care all. Bye-bye.